Have you ever wondered what the ancient Greeks really thought happened after you died? Forget the simple ideas of heaven or hell. We're about to take a trip into their vision of the afterlife. And let me tell you, it's a rich, complex world that reveals so much about how they saw life itself.
So, what came next? Was it a straightforward heaven or hell kind of deal? Well, the reality is way more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting. For the Greeks, the afterlife wasn't just some place you showed up to.
And that's the key right there. It was a journey. Every single soul had to undertake this trek, a path filled with gatekeepers, major obstacles, and very specific rituals. So come on, let's follow the path of a soul as it heads into the great below.
Okay, so our journey starts at the very moment of death. The ancient Greeks believed that right at this instant, the essential part of a person, their life force, their very essence, separated from the physical body. And this essence had a name, the psyche. Now, the psyche wasn't exactly what we might think of as a personality or consciousness today. It was more like a breath or a faint, ghostly image of the person who just died. And once it finally got to the underworld, it became what's known as a shade, just a dim, powerless echo of its former self. So once it's freed from the body, the psyche isn't just left to wander around aimlessly. Nope, a guide is already waiting. A divine figure whose entire job is to lead the soul on the first leg of its journey to the realm of Hades.
And your guide is none other than the god Hermes, but in his very special role as Hermes Psychopumpos, which literally means leader of souls. With his golden wand, he'd guide the newly departed. You know, he wasn't some grim, scary figure. People would actually pray to him, hoping for a gentle and painless passing.
But here's the catch. Hermes only takes you so far. He leads you right to the edge of the underworld, to a border that's defined by a series of pretty intimidating rivers. And these aren't just any rivers, they're powerful, symbolic barriers that mark that final, irreversible split between the world of the living and the realm of the dead.
The first, and definitely the most famous of these rivers, is the Styx. This was the river of hatred, and its power was so absolute that even the gods, the Olympians themselves, swore their most sacred, unbreakable oaths upon its waters. To break an oath on the Styx was just unthinkable. That tells you how powerful this river was in the Greek imagination.
After the Styx, the soul finds itself on the banks of the Acheron, the river of misery or woe. And it's right here, on these murky shores, that the soul meets its ride to the other side, a grim, silent ferryman named Charon.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, because this crossing, it's a transaction. Charon doesn't work for free. To get on his ferry, you had to pay a fare, 1 obol, a small coin that families would place in the mouth of their loved one before burial. This little detail shows just how vital proper burial rites were, because without that payment, the soul was doomed to wander the shores for 100 years, totally trapped between worlds.
And finally, there's the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. In some versions of the myths, souls would drink from its waters to wipe their memories totally clean, erasing every joy and sorrow from their past life. Imagine that, a complete loss of who you were. It was the final step into the anonymity of being dead.
Okay, so you've made it across the rivers. You have truly arrived. But the journey isn't quite over. A final destination is waiting. While the earliest beliefs were kind of vague, a much clearer picture eventually developed. One with different realms inside the underworld, each tied to the kind of life a person had led.
For the vast majority of people, not especially good, but not wicked either, the final stop was the Asphodel Meadows. Think of it as a gray, spectral, and totally neutral place. The shades here just flitted about, aimlessly. No reward, no punishment, just an eternity and a kind of joyless, perpetual twilight.
But for those at the extremes, 2 very different fates awaited. For the truly wicked, there was Tartarus, a deep, dark pit of torment, a cosmic prison that was so secure it even held the defeated Titans. On the flip side, for the great heroes and the super righteous, there was Elysium, a paradise where life was easy and blissful. This distinction is so cool because it really shows the development of a moral post-death judgment in Greek thought.
Now, this vast and complicated realm wasn't just some chaotic free-for-all. Oh no, it had a very clear hierarchy, with powerful gods who ruled over the dead and made sure its grim, unshakable order was maintained.
At the very top, you have the king and queen. Hades, brother to Zeus and Poseidon, was the lord of the dead. Now, it's crucial to understand this. He was stern and unyielding, sure, but he wasn't an evil figure like a devil. He was a just, if pretty fearsome, ruler. And his queen was Persephone, whose famous myth of being abducted and then tricked into eating pomegranate seeds tied her to the underworld for part of every year, which is how the Greeks explained the changing of the seasons.
And get this, there was basically a whole bureaucracy of death. A soul's final destination wasn't arbitrary. It was decided by a panel of 3 judges, Aeacus, Rhadamanthus, and Minos. These guys were once mortal kings so famous for their wisdom that they just kept their job after death, with Minos holding the final deciding vote.
And you absolutely can't talk about the underworld without mentioning its most famous resident, Cerberus. Hades' gigantic, 3-headed dog stood guard at the gates, and his job wasn't to keep people out, it was to keep the dead in. A few legendary heroes like Heracles and Orpheus managed to get past him, but for most shades, honey cake left in their tomb was the best way to keep him happy.
So, we've gone over the journey, we've seen the layout, but what was it actually like to be a shade for all eternity? What was the actual quality of this existence?
To really get it, you have to understand 2 concepts the living had: menos, which is strength, and phrenes, which is wit. These are what allowed people to act, to think, and to actually affect the world. The shades? They had none of that. They were powerless, pretty much unaware, and totally static, frozen at the moment of their death, forever unable to change or grow. A warrior who died in battle would just remain blood-spattered for all time.
Homer just captures this feeling perfectly. In the Odyssey, the ghost of the incredible hero Achilles tells Odysseus that he would rather be a poor farmer servant on earth than be the king over all the dead. That one quote tells you everything you need to know about the profound Greek pessimism about the afterlife. And that really brings us to the ultimate takeaway. For the ancient Greeks, death wasn't total annihilation. Your essence, your psyche, it kept going. But it was the loss of everything that made life worth living: strength, awareness, purpose, the ability to change. It was an eternity of existing, sure, but with absolutely no substance.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If you knew that this was your ultimate fate, not some great reward or terrible punishment, but just a permanent, shadowy echo of yourself, how would that change the way you value your time right here, right now, in the world of the living? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.